I decided that I'm going to rip off Kelly Locke and Doug Zeef and do article aftermaths as well. It worked out really well for them, and it's a good way to answer any questions or comments or revisit the deck list, and especially since the new Forbidden Limited list just came out, and give it, what's today, the 13th or whatever, 2.5 weeks, and or 3 weeks rather, we'll have a new format to play under. And so first, I'll go over the deck list and see what things would probably be good to take out for the next format. Dragon Rulers have all been hit to one, if you haven't heard, and that's no longer a deck anymore. Dragoonity is not really a deck anymore. A lot of, I mean, those are the only two decks that really just got. I mean, Final Countdown died. Anything with self destruction button died, thankfully. But that actually will change what you'd probably want to main deck in here. The Iron Wall and Emptiness are two things that I decided to main against dragons, just because they fit in so seamless against your strategy. It's also good against spellbooks if you can't summon your beast. It's a good anti-fate card. It's actually really good against Bujins too, which I'm realizing is probably going to be one of the better decks at the beginning of the format. I'm not sure if that's going to be one of the best decks at the end of the format, but not just because Gravekeepers come out, but also just because Bujins is a solid deck. I mean, you can main deck a lot of hate just stuff, basically everything but Iron Wall and Lightning Prisoning Mirror, which are two cards that you would probably have in your side deck or should be considering at least for a local event. I, I don't know how the format's going to shape up, but I would probably take out the Emptiness, but I would keep in the Iron Wall because it's good against things like Bujins, which will be good, or Spellbooks are still going to be good even with only one Fate, and Priestess just going to be good against a lot of stuff. For the spells, I mean, literally everything in there is either it brings out a samurai either to your hand or field, or what you draw cards. So I don't know why I take out any of the spells. If anything, I want to add in upstarts. I mean, now that I'm taking out two Red Ox, not sure what I'm going to do about hand traps. Maxi isn't going to be as good anymore in the next format unless. I mean, we have two Lone Fire. We have a ton of zombie stuff coming out. I mean, it was the best against Dragon Rulers or Dragoonity, and it's mediocre to subpar to a 1-for-1 against things like Fire Fists, Grave. I mean, technically you can have it as like a 1-for-1 for Gravekeepers. Spellbooks on a life. Just I don't know how important Maxi is going to be. We'll see. And Squire, without the constant source of Redox, I'm not sure how useful Squire is going to be. To be honest, I mean you could take that out in Dojo, but I still do like it for level 8 plays if you ever happen to draw under Redox, which hopefully you should. Anishi and something like Double-Edged Sword Technique may be more important to manage the number of Earths in your graveyard, so you can drop Grandsoil and bring back Beast, Barkion, Xian. I didn't mention this in the article, but one thing that's good about Grandsoil is sometimes you can be a little bit more reckless. Like, I could go for, I mean, sometimes you could try to, like, outwit your opponent mentally and try to think of what synchro you'll need right then, or try to bluff cards and blah 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 blah. But I mean, with a Grandsoil, and if you can manage your Earths well, you can just be like, well, I'll just make a beast now, and it's probably going to be pretty good. But even if they manage to kill it or something, I'll just bring it back next turn. Same thing with. That's actually what sometimes I'd have to do with a Xian. When I know they could get rid of the Xian, and could be up for debate. Like I say, not entirely sure if they have traps face down or if they have spells in hand to get rid of Beast or Barkion. I'd go for a play just to make Xian, so I can make sure I kill one of their cards, and they have to waste a second resource to destroy it. And then you can actually go into Grandsoil and just revive your Xian. Like that's a you don't have to take as much of a gamble of like trying to guess which one would be better, Beast or Barkion, depending on the situation. Now I'm going to look down at some of the comments and see. I try to respond to most comments just to give people my ideas of why I did stuff. Actually generated a lot of comments, which I was surprised. I didn't know Samurais were such a loved deck. One thing I did notice was some people were confused why you would play Landways, and I'm very confused at their confusion because if you've ever played Samurais or a deck that can generate Landways in such an easy fashion with decent amount of spells, I mean, you are running 11, and you may not use all of them so far, but push. I mean, you're only going to use that to push to OTK, but sometimes that's kind of what you need to do in Samurais. I mean, they're notorious for being able to swarm the field. So if you have a chance to guarantee that your opponent can't stop your OTK, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. Some people said Driven Daredevil's better, and it's like, I'm sorry, it's not. Like, Driven Daredevil is not better than Landois. It's not. Um, Surprised no one was surprised about Levier. That was the only rank 3 I decided to include in the entire deck, simply because you could bring back anything that you banished and maybe go into an Excour play. Like, it's going to be rare that you're going to do that, and but that definitely has utility. Same with Gigant Castle. Like, that's very, very rare that I ever went into Gigant Castle. But when I did, I was like, that's. I mean, it was actually really helpful because, like, sometimes later in the game, if you don't have any, if you're kind of like, I guess top decking is the word, and you have Redox in graveyard, like, what are you going to do with a Kagamusha? Well, might as well make Gigant Castle because that's the only level 9 right now that you can make with just 2 monsters. But you'll probably have to mix up the extra deck because Redox actually, without Redox, you can't make level 8 and 9 synchros nearly as easily. So that'll actually change up a lot. Kind of discouraged about that. I mean, if I made the ban list or I made the rules, I would have, even though it's so not kosher, put all the Dragon Ruler had a clause in the official rule book. I don't know how you'd put it on the forbidden and limited list, but basically say that you can only use a maximum of 3 Dragon Ruler cards in a deck and unban all the babies. So for some reason, I mean, I don't know why you would include babies when you can just include the 3 big ones, but I mean, like, I've talked about it links before. Like, Redox is so cool in a deck like this, or Plants, and Title's really good at Mermails. Blaster is good in decks, and Tempest is good in things like Harpies. Do they play? I think they play Tempest, just because you can make a. But then Hysteric Party. I'm not really familiar with the Harpy deck because a lot of the cards scare me. Because Giant Claws and large-chested women with Giant Claws is honestly terrifying. So just looking over article, pretty stand by all the claims I made. I guess I maybe overspoke a little bit when I say Grandsoil is by far the best of the 4 Elemental Lords. I still agree that it's the best. Maybe I shouldn't have said that it's like leaps and bounds better. Moon Glacier is still a good card. And, I mean, Dragoons is at 1, so you can't search it out. And just, it's much better in the early game. Like, late game, a Grandsoil could bring back something useful and do damage. Moon Glacier, you can summon it, and you probably just have any cards in hand. It's kind of useless. Not saying Grandsoil is phenomenal against the established field. Like, Pyrorex would be good against an established field. But Pyrorex and Windrose are pretty bad. So, Grandsoil is definitely the... I mean, I guess you could say in my opinion, but most players will agree with me that Grandsoil is by far the best one. So, actually, I came full circle to reiterate that statement. Yeah, you could play my really terrible first version, which I played during wind-up format of this deck, right before, it was in the fall last year, where I played Cardies instead of Redox. That was really bad. Don't do that. It was great to get another Earth in the graveyard and draw cards, but it didn't really help you out anything. So, back to Grandsoil for a second. I think I may have already touched on this, but you can actually be really reckless with Grandsoil to an extent. Like, if you're debating between what synchro to make, whether it be Beast or Barkion, trying to read your opponent, if you don't really have any idea what your opponent's doing and they're making really stupid, like, Gaga and attack, Gaga Cowboy in attack mode is like, sometimes you have to do it, but it's like the stupidest play ever. And so if your opponent's making stuff like that and you can't read them at all because they're doing really random things, you could just make a Sheehan, force them to waste multiple cards, and then bring it back with Grandsoil. I mean, it's a good middle ground in between Beast and Barkion, so, I mean, that's something that you kind of have to do just to... It may not be the best in that situation because you'll have chosen where you should have chosen Beast or should have chosen Barkion, but if you sometimes just making a Sheehan to guarantee at least 1 or 2 negations and also kind of moderate your graveyard Earth count a little bit, it's a really cool play. Try not to say too much, but for the traps, I did talk about this a little bit earlier, but I don't know. I just want to say I don't know how important Vanity's Emptiness is going to be. I still think Iron Wall is going to be a really good card, but Emptiness I'm not so sure about. But yeah, if there's any other questions you want me to answer, just leave it in the comments on TCG Player. But thanks for watching, and sorry if I ripped off Kelly Locke and Doug Zeef too much, but this was Article Aftermath number 1, Grandsoil Samurais.